Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today at our 19th DukeNY Career Conversation. I'm Leighanne Oh, Pratt 15 and Grad School 17, and also DukeNY board member. Today, we're so lucky to have with us Nicole, who's a Fuqua graduate class of 2008. She is currently the Vice President of Global Franchise Planning at Nickelodeon. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, it's nice to see all of you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. I mean, you've had such an amazing career that's really, I feel like, had a lot of winding paths, not to mention also going to Fuqua in between. Like, we'd love to just start off with where you came from and like how you got started. It seems like you started in the music industry. Could you start by how you got into that and kind of the path forward to Nickelodeon?
Sure. So I think by the age of 13, I was pretty certain that I was going to have a very storied career in the music industry. And I was going to rise to become the next Tommy Mottola and be the CEO of Sony 550 Music. And so that was sort of my North Star for quite some time. And I was also a classically trained flute player. So there were thoughts that maybe I would, be, talented enough to join the New York Philharmonic. But as I sort of learned a little bit more about what it took to do that, I leaned more back on my plans to work in the record industry. So I actually went to NYU, that has a wonderful music business program. So I graduated from there with a degree in music business and a concentration in music business. I started at Universal Records, working in first A&R, which is artist scouting, and then moving into business and legal affairs, but ultimately kind of having a 65-page recording agreement as my, kind of work product didn't particularly sing to me. But the thing that I did love was being able to turn on the radio or go to the record store, I'm totally dating myself, and be able to see the albums that I worked on or hear the songs that I worked on the radio. And as I was talking to a mentor of mine, she had said that I should consider going back to school for an M.B.A, kind of broadening my business acumen. And then as I started to discover, music business and figuring out what I wanted to do in life, I stumbled across this wonderful thing called brand management. So I went to Duke with a concentration in product management. And really from there, I worked at Kraft Foods, in their kids business, working on Capri Sun and Kool-Aid. And then from there, I actually moved on and into a role at Wasserman Media and Entertainment Group, where I actually was tapped to run the Pepsi Music account, which was negotiating the music sponsorship strategies that they had around Super Bowl and other really amazing things like South by Southwest. I did ultimately miss brand management, so I actually ended up going back and doing this very terrible job, which led me down the path of being the lead for innovation at a candy company. So at one point I was the real life Willy Wonka. So it was my job to come up with new and interesting candy in the marketplace. So that was awesome. And then one day Nickelodeon actually came to me and asked if I would, help lead their franchise strategy and planning. So now I'm here at Nickelodeon, leading some of the world's most amazing IP like SpongeBob SquarePants and Rugrats and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and really kind of helping to drive, long range plans for those franchises and ultimately, make sure that we have consumer products at retail. So it's been an amazing ride, but I never would have guessed that I'd be here.
No, that's amazing. And I think just like listening to your story and your narrative, it's like very clear that you're trying to find meaning and purpose through your jobs and the roles and the things that you're doing, especially in the brand management and the names that you represent. Like, what does that mean to you? And like, how do you create a work environment that is meaningful to you?
Yeah, so I think, I've always really felt like you had to have a job that made you happy. You had to have a job that when you woke up in the morning, you didn't hit snooze on the alarm, it was 2 feet on the floor, and you really had to love what you did, right? And I think we spend too many hours of our day at work. So we have to ensure that it's something that we love. And I've been very fortunate to be able to kind of find that middle ground, find that way of, you know, making a living, but also employing all of my passions and channeling all of my work into something that I really love. And that's always kind of been my guiding light in terms of any job that's come across. And I think if you're not really clear on, you know, what drives you, if you're not really clear on your passion, I think that's where people fall into the trap of, you know, kind of working in jobs that they don't necessarily love, or, you know, it takes a while for them to realize that it's a job that they don't especially love. So for me, it's always been, you know, kind of keeping a list in the back of my mind of, you know, either companies I want to work for or things that really make me happy. And I think working in the kids space in particular, and also working around media and entertainment is truly what, you know, what makes me happy. And at Nickelodeon, our mission statement is to make the world a more playful place. Like, how can you hate a place like that, right? So, so for me, it's just always making sure that I'm taking time for myself, checking in with my career, and making sure that, you know, everything always continues to be a good fit, and that I am happy. And that's really kind of what kind of guides me and has shaped my career thus far.
No, thank you. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, when you go through that checklist and you're doing that check to yourself to kind of like make sure that you're still on the right, you have the right purpose and the right vision, do you mind kind of sharing maybe like the top 3 things you think through when you go down this checklist?
Yeah, of course. So I think, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't say that upward mobility, right, was one of those things. Like, and mobility could be in, you know, in very literal terms, right, like title, or, you know, kind of just, you know, promotion sense. But I also think it's about, are you learning, right? Like, so am I happy where I am? Do I love what I'm doing? But most importantly, am I learning, right? And am I getting skills? Are there things that are, you know, transferable that I am kind of adding to my toolkit? So that's one. 2, I think, you know, am I working with smart people, right? So are people, you know, kind of making me smarter? It sort of, you know, cascades down from, am I learning, right? But it's about surrounding yourself with smart people that continue to help you raise the bar. And then the third thing really is just, you know, it's about a product that you're passionate about. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. Like, I don't know if anyone on this call like works at Kraft Foods, but there was a period where I had to roll off working on Capri Sun, which was the most fun kids beverage in the world, and work on Maxwell House Coffee for a while, which I really didn't have a passion for. So the question is like, do you honestly have a passion for, you know, for the product that you're working on, or, you know, for whatever it is, in whatever shape it takes? Like, do you really have a passion for it? So I think at the end of the day, to kind of circle back and recap, it's, you know, am I building a toolkit that basically has transferable skills that I can take elsewhere? Are there people that I work with every day that are making me smarter? And am I passionate about, you know, the actual product that I'm working on? And if all of those things aren't a yes, well, then it's time to start asking yourself a different question, right?
No, I mean, just like piggybacking on your point on passion, I think passion is often like, it's so hard to define, and people come to it at different time points of their lives. And to me, actually, passion is like a big privilege, almost like having a job where you get to actually pursue your passion. Not everybody gets to do that. Then, so maybe like for you, you touched on building block. Like for you, like you've done so many internships, and I remember you telling me how like you literally the day after your graduation, you went straight to work. Like for you, what were some of the building blocks that you feel, looking back now, like those are important skill sets that I needed to be successful today?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like, one, you sort of always have to be in a place where you're willing to say yes. I think I've done like the most menial tasks in the universe, but had to kind of see the bigger picture, right? So it was, you know, go get me coffee, that usual thing. But it was like, but, you know, if I go get you coffee, that means I'll be able to walk into this meeting and I'll be able to hear this conversation that's happening between these two very powerful executives. So what do I get from it, right? Like, so to me, it's really about, you know, being able to say yes and being open. And that's just kind of in general, right? Like, so let's just say that that's like a sheen that's on everything. But in terms of the building blocks, like, I think I've always just been, you know, what I tell people on my team is that you have to have like drive for results, right? So it's sort of like you have to want to be better, and you have to want to just have this like voracious drive to improve. And I think a lot of times, some of those building blocks that have really propelled me the most were instances or times where I actually wasn't that good. Like there was a time where I was like terrible at Excel. I was terrible at modeling. I was terrible at loads of things, right? But having that level of uneasiness was something that I really dug into and really
Mhm.
wanted to work around. And I think that was also a serious building block for me. So it was like failing at something and then trying to really like get to greatness. And so I think that coupled with like always just being willing to do the little job, just and knowing and being able to see the forest through the trees and knowing that there was like kind of something bigger out there, right? Versus just being
Mhm.
like, oh, they just want me to go get coffee or whatever it is. Like I think those two very simplistic things, I know that they are incredibly simplistic, but I think those are the two things that drove me. I mean, when I worked at Tops in innovation, like and did candy innovation, there was a night at 3 a.m. where I was digging around in a vat of candy in a plant in Ohio because I was trying to figure out what was wrong with the formula that we were using for a product, right? Like, so for me, it's always like no task is like too small because it's all about
Mhm.
just trying to understand and really harness and be the best at something.
No, I mean, I love what you said about having the bigger picture, but I think sometimes maybe like when is enough? Like, you know, how many menial tasks can you really be like, maybe I'm being taken advantage of? Or like, where do you draw that line between doing the small menial work, but also knowing that it may lead to something else? Like, where is that line?
Right. I mean, that varies for everyone. And like, look, who wouldn't want a free intern who always like, you know, did all of the work, right? So at some point, yes, you have to move on to
Yeah.
bigger things. I think, you know, to some extent, you know, I've probably been very lucky to work to a certain extent in, you know, a lot of places that have recognized my hard work, right? But we all have to take a temperature check at a certain point in time and say, I am being taken advantage of or what have it, you know, what have you. I think for me, it's just more like, you know what, I've done everything I've come to do. Like, I remember there was a time in one of my internships where my boss was really busy and I slid over, like she had gone to go do something and I slid over into her chair and was basically doing all of the work that like she would never let me do. And she came back and I slid over and she was like, wait, you did all this for me? And I was like, yeah. She goes, I didn't even know you knew how to do that. So for me, it was more like, okay, it's time for me to move on because I actually understand your job and can kind of do it, right? So like, now you would be remiss if you didn't give me a job, right? Or et cetera. So for me, it was time to start
Absolutely.
looking for a full-time job, basically, right?
Yeah. And maybe a question, since you talked about your boss, like maybe a question on leadership. You're now in a leadership role and you've probably had a lot of bosses throughout your time at your tenure and your different jobs. Like, what are some characteristics that you learned to carry over and also not like lead with an examples and like, what kind of leader do you envision to be?
Yeah. So I mean, and there are good bosses and there are bad bosses, right? And we learn from them all, don't we? So I'd say that I think the I think the kind of ethos under which I operate is to always make myself redundant. I'm not doing my team a service, right? If I'm keeping all of the information to myself and never sharing it, and I'm not doing my team a service if I'm not sharing my abilities or skills or teaching, right? And so ultimately, like, I know that my indicator of success is, you know, making sure that my team can go on and live with, you know, live far beyond me, right? And if I, as one of my old bosses would say, like, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I know you'll be able to take over my job, right? So I always try to make sure that there's a certain sense of, I guess, redundancy, right? And making sure that just everyone kind of is taught the same way. There's, you know, there's harmony and consistency. I think the other thing that I always look for kind of three things in my employees, and that's like intellectual horsepower, right? So it's sort of these things that really can't be taught, right? Like, you have to just be smart, right? That's just, you know, that's the thing. And it could be common sense, it could be book smart. There's drive for results, like someone who truly cares about their work product and will check it once and then check it again. And then there's someone who can really manage interpersonal relationships. And I found that no matter what companies I go to, those three things are always huge success factors. When I see like who the rock stars are, they always have those three things. So for me, that's who I'm looking for when I'm hiring. And that's what I'm seeking to try to, you know, teach them everything that I know, so that if one day I'm no longer here, right, my team comes on and I've done a service and I've left everything better than I found it.
No, thank you. I mean, that's amazing. And we're already halfway through our call. And we're going to go into Q&A, and we'd love to encourage everybody to turn on their videos to make this more engaging. We had a couple of questions that came through chat and also through email, so I would love to go through them with you. So one of my favorite questions I got was, how has your career path differed from the expectations and career goals you had at the start of your career?
Oh, first I'm going to say hi, Courtney, because I see Courtney, who's my coworker. Hi, Courtney. So how's my career different? I kind of alluded to this in the upfront, right? So I thought I was going to join the New York Philharmonic, and I was going to be, you know, first flute, and life was going to be great. And then I actually started to play the flute and realized, perhaps I'm not that good. But then and then I was like, well, maybe I can parlay this into work in the music industry. So I did always know that, you know, one of my big passions was music, right? And that I wanted to be around music no matter what I did. So I think in most of my roles, I've always been able to kind of weave music into that. And I even sit on the board of a jazz festival right now. So even when it's not, you know, directly related to my work, I still get to do that. And how is it different? Well, I never thought I'd be digging around in a vat of candy in Ohio, right? I can easily tell you that I never thought I'd be working on SpongeBob SquarePants or talking about, you know, turtle powers. So those are some ways that it's different, but I think at the end of the day, I always knew that whatever I did, I had to be super passionate about.
Thank you. We got a question from Phil in the audience. What has been more of a challenge, clearing a sample in the music business or getting prime placement at a large retailer like Walmart, Sam's Club, for a consumer brand?
Oh man. So part of my job in business and legal affairs at Universal Motown, hi Phil, was to do sample clearance. So that basically means when a producer lifts from another track, so in hip hop this is pretty prevalent, right? You have to go get permissions to use somebody else's music in a song. So there was actually one time where I had to send an intern to the county jail to go basically get a clearance from Suge Knight, who was a notorious felon who owned the rights to a certain song that we needed. That was pretty difficult. But I would actually say that getting a product into retail is harder. It's harder. And it's because it passes through so many hands, and there are so many ways that things could go wrong, and the stars have to align in order for all of those things to go right. And the buyer could be having a bad day. The buyer just decides that like his 5-year-old kid hates your product. Well, you may not be getting it in today, right? Like, so there's a lot that has to go right. So I'd say that that's probably the harder thing.
Where are you looking, if at all, to leave a mark next? Do you have goals, interests elsewhere, or like something like run your own company?
I think ultimately I would love to run my own company. I would definitely love to sit on multiple boards. Like I'd love to be kind of, you know, in my 70s or 80s and just kind of sitting on multiple boards. So that's what I hope for myself. But, you know, in the near term, I think, you know, at Viacom CBS, there's a lot changing, right? Like the media landscape is changing, right? And I feel like every week, month, year, right, there's something new for us to try to accomplish. And so, you know, recently I took my team from being US centric to global. So that was a lot. That was quite the undertaking. And now it's really about kind of understanding, you know, how we as marketers support our consumer products as our media lives on other platforms. So sometimes, you know, so it used to be very easy when, you know, SpongeBob SquarePants only lived on Nickelodeon. But now, you know, SpongeBob SquarePants lives on other platforms. Sometimes there's product that doesn't live on, there's, you know, IP or media that doesn't live on Nickelodeon at all. Sometimes I'm asking or begging Netflix for permission to do things, right? So I think that for me, like cracking the SVOD, like AVOD, PVOD kind of equation is really important. And that's kind of one of the things I want to do in the near future.
I think it's interesting because the next question I was going to ask was just about SpongeBob SquarePants. And one of the questions is, SpongeBob SquarePants is one of the most iconic character brands of the 21st century. So after 20 years, how has Nickelodeon continued to keep the show fresh, top of mind for an entirely new generation of children?
That's amazing. Like, is that someone from my team? Like, did someone plant that? Courtney, was that you?
No, I think it's from Dan Nolan.
That was me.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Like, are you looking for an internship? So yeah. So we actually just celebrated the 20th anniversary of SpongeBob SquarePants, and Courtney can attest. It was a massive celebration. And what was really great about the 20th anniversary is that, you know, we got to see, I guess it's the people that work behind the scenes every day, just how beloved SpongeBob is. Like, we know it, you know, he exists in over 130 territories, is translated into 30 languages across the world. But in the 20th anniversary, what was so amazing was we managed to get all of the local market teams to celebrate SpongeBob at once. And so we had, you know, a massive pop-up experience in LA that allowed people to actually visit Bikini Bottom, which the fans went nuts for, and like it sold out in like hours. We did a collaboration with Nike and Kyrie Irving for the Kyrie 5s, and he did like different sneakers, one for each character. We did like runway collections, and we partnered with Romero Brito. I got to meet Romero Brito and commission a massive piece of artwork that hangs in our now empty office. But you know, there's so much that we did, and it was so amazing. And it was just like every person that we talked to that we wanted to partner with, just their enthusiasm for SpongeBob was really just uplifting, and just like, you know, I mean, I think it buoyed our team and just made us feel even better about, you know, what we do every day. And so how do we keep him fresh? Like, we just continue to make sure that we're keeping him at the center of the cultural pop, you know, zeitgeist with all of these other partnerships that we're doing. And we're expanding the SpongeBob content universe, to be quite honest, and that is public knowledge. And so there'll be more SpongeBob coming soon in different iterations. So more to come from SpongeBob.
But everybody on this call who loves SpongeBob is very excited for that. Next question from Melissa. What is the biggest challenge that you're facing in your role when it comes to the transition to streaming? Can you talk through the competing priorities when balancing linear and streaming?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. You know, we haven't quite cracked the nut yet, and we also have our own streaming service, right? So we are, you know, we're rebranding and launching Paramount Plus soon. So we have a whole team dedicated to that. So really, there's been a discussion about, you know, kind of what content do we keep on our, you know, channels on linear, and what content do we give to the streaming platforms, et cetera. But what I'd say is, you know, we're definitely working in lockstep with all of these folks that formerly we saw as kind of competitors, right? And so one example I'd love to bring up is Avatar. So Avatar, The Last Airbender, right, was a Nick animation series that lived on our channel in the 90s, and effectively, like, that show didn't do that well at that time. But Avatar has a massive fan base, and Legend of Korra has a massive fan base. When we dropped the library content on Netflix, the property now has resurged, and effectively it held the #1 slot, I think, on Netflix for like 60 days in a row. And now all of a sudden Walmart is asking us for bedding sets and other things, and we're launching toys. And so, you know, so we're really trying to figure out how we harness the power of our library content with streaming services, and then how we kind of, you know, launch new things, especially to drive acquisition on our own platforms, but also to reach new audiences.
Understood. Maybe the next question is more about like how you get started in this career. Like what can someone do? So like, how does a 2020 grad get started in this environment?
Message me on LinkedIn. Yeah, just, you know, just I would say reach out, like build a list of, it's all the things that, you know, the career development office would probably tell you, right? So build your list of target companies, talk to everyone, you know, find contacts, talk to people that, you know, that work there to get a sense for the culture and where you could fit in. And, you know, again, I think it circles back to what I said at the beginning of the call, like, just be able to see the larger picture. Like, sometimes we have to do the jobs that we don't love to get the jobs that we love. And, you know, just try to say yes where it makes sense. Obviously, you don't want to be taken advantage of, but be open to saying yes.
Great, thank you. Another question from Yali. What are the main differences between your roles and brand management at classic CPG companies compared to what you do today?
Oh, I think I froze, so I think I missed the first portion of that question, if you could repeat it.
Oh, no problem. Let me read it one more time. What are the main differences between your roles in brand management at classic CPG companies compared to what you do today?
Yeah, so I would say that I get to do more cool stuff now. I think that's the difference. But what I'd say is, you know, in classical, oh, hi, Citrina. So yeah, so Citrina knows we work together at Craft. So yeah, so really like at Craft, it was, you know, running your own small business, right? Owning the P&L from soup to nuts, you know, really understanding what the inputs were for your product. And then sort of marketing was an afterthought. It was something that, you know, was really sort of left up to your agencies. You didn't pay a lot of attention to it until they said, hey, I need you to look at this rough cut of this TVC or what have you. Now I sort of lead with a lot of the marketing, right? I don't, because we don't own our own supply chain, because we deal in specifically a licensing model, I get to focus on more about the marketing and really talking to our consumers on a day-to-day basis. So that is really what's different. And also the media component, right? So now for me, it's more about connecting the dots between what our new releases are, like what's the rollout of our episodes and things like that, and how do we link it back to consumer products and ultimately driving revenue.
Understood. This one is more about like Fuqua and M.B.A. I guess for you, because you slightly took a pivot in your career, do you feel like the M.B.A. was necessary? And right now, for someone in your role, is an M.B.A. necessary?
I'd say yes. So I would say that there's not as many people in my kind of on my team or in my role with an M.B.A., but I every day I see the advantages of having one. You know, I've made my team build decision models. Yeah, that's a thing. So, you know, I'm sure they love it. But anyway, so I've made them build decision models. You know, it's definitely helped me in terms of, you know, negotiating contracts, et cetera, and just really understanding operations. So I think all of those things always come together and somehow, you know, find a way to rear their heads. And I wouldn't trade my M.B.A. for the world.
Understood. So like, I think maybe like to follow up on the questions, I think if someone who's asking is kind of in the middle of their career, like they're thinking about going back, like, again, it seems like it is necessary to go back to school. Is maybe like COVID the right time to do it? Or what is kind of your thoughts on the COVID environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. Like if the pivot that they're looking to make is significant, wherein, you know, having that internship between their first and second year is critical to kind of proving out that they can do, you know, that job, I would say yes, 100%. But if, you know, what they're trying to do is very close to, you know, kind of their current role, I'd say probably not. So I think that that's the first question that needs to be answered. And then with respect to COVID, I have to say that we haven't stopped, you know, we haven't stopped hiring. I know that there are other industries that have been impacted, but I think, you know, a lot of what we're seeing is shift from physical to digital sales. Like we actually just had our earnings call. We're pacing nicely. Like it's not like we've been, you know, greatly impacted. So, you know, it really depends on the industry, but I'd say consumer products is actually pretty stable in the face of COVID at this point in time. It'd be one thing if you were saying you wanted to go work at Live Nation, I'd say.
So another question from the audience. So you're female, you're a mother and you're a wife and a woman of color. Like, what does that mean to you being in your industry currently? And how do you think the industry will change in the future?
Yeah, I think I'm hopeful that the time that we're currently in will serve as a reckoning. I think it remains to be seen, you know, whether or not that will stick. But I know in our halls and with our leadership, you know, they have definitely kind of taken a stand and have taken this seriously and have said, you know what, like we are committing to D&I. And I think that's the first step. And I think that, you know, just consistency and continuing to, you know, make step changes to that is important. But I'll say, you know, there are times where I'm still the only person of color in a room. And I will say that, you know, being specifically in the consumer products division, we took a look at our products and said, oh, actually, we don't have any products that, you know, that look like a lot of our audience, right? So I think it's important to note that over 50% of the US kid population under 15 is a minority at this point. So the minority is the majority. And if you look at kind of our content on the channel, it's actually the inverse. And if you look at our consumer products, which mirror our content, right, it's the inverse. So we're taking more changes and more strides to really make sure that our content reflects our audiences and ultimately that our consumer products reflect our audience, so that my little boy, right, can turn on the TV and see something like Santiago of the Seas on Nick Jr. and Santiago, which is a show about, you know, kind of indigenous Hispanic culture, you know, looks like him, and he can get a little Santiago doll, right? And it's not an odd thing anymore. And that's kind of what our goals are, and that's what I hope we move to, and that's what it means for me as a mom.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And one final question, just because it's so funny, from Phil. Best Leo DiCaprio or Leonardo from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
See, but you know, both Leos are actually very diverse, I'd say, right? Like they've had multiple iterations. It's true. Like, so what we say with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is that it has iteration in its DNA. There's been so many different, right, Leos, and then there's been so many different Leo DiCaprios, right? But I'd say by far, like the Ninja Leo is probably the better one. Also, you know, pizza, that sort of thing. He can eat all that pizza and never gain weight. Like, it's just, you know, I think he's the better Leo.
No, thank you so much for your time, Nicole, today. I mean, this has been a fascinating conversation. I bet everybody on the call loved it as well. So thank you so much. And to everybody who joined, thank you for joining our 19th New Yorker conversation. Before I end, I know Nicole offered her LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out, I think LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with her. But thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Have a great rest of the evening.
Hey, Nicole.